Hi, I'm sorry I'm late. I had everything set up half an hour ago, ready to go, and I came back to the computer and everything had shut down. So I don't know why. Well, actually, I do know why. The plug had come undone, and so I had to start over. So I'm sorry. Today is Thursday, December 3rd. Thursday, December 3rd, 2020. I don't know if you guys have watched General Flynn's Lieutenant General Flynn's first interview. It's on WVWTV.com. That's WVWTV.com. And it was Lieutenant General Flynn, General McInerney, and Mary Fanning. And Mary Fanning has been discovering all kinds of things since 2015. Now, we know Larry Nichols knew everything going on from, hold on. I'm going to have to see what I can do to get this camera started again. Will it go? There we go. See, I've got it tilted at the wrong angle, but I think if I tilt it too much, it's going to turn off on me. So sorry about that. You get to look at my forehead today. Anyhow, we know that Larry was very much involved since the 90s or sooner, late 80s. The 86 plan that they wrote was the plan that was supposed to put Hillary Clinton in the White House, and Bill Clinton was supposed to be the lieutenant general, or the head of the UN, to make them the most powerful couple in world history. And the Lord had other plans. And when Larry turned on them, he did everything he could to stop that. So a couple prayer requests right here at the top. Please pray for all these witnesses. I understand several of them have had their lives threatened. One has lost her job. Tires have been slashed. One's in intensive care. Jenna Ellis reminded the Michigan committee last night that state legislatures are to ensure against corruption and against corrupt votes, and also to ensure against foreign interference. And she reminded them that they had not done their job. And so we need to be praying about the hearings that are happening in Georgia, Nevada, and Michigan. Those are the three places right now. Lynn Wood's lawsuit in Georgia has now gone, as far as I know, to the circuit court with, that's where Clarence Thomas is overseeing it. So, hey, Greg, welcome. There are so many places to get information on what's really going on. I have decided that maybe if I just pull it closer, that'll help. I've decided that there's only so much that I can take in. I am so aware that fraud has happened on a huge level. I feel like I have enough information without having to know the details, because there's not much I can do about it. So I called the governor of Georgia, and I said, look, you have got to convene the legislators to look into this. You can't just blow it over and certify the votes. Plus, when we have governors certifying the election results, that is also not legal, because it is up to the legislature to certify the votes. And so, man, everything's all mixed up and upside down. Now, was this all pre-planned to create chaos? Is this part of the powers that be wanting to do this? I don't know. I know that God is in charge. God is in control. Satan and his minions cannot do what they do without God's permission. So God's allowing this. We have to remember God is allowing this for a reason. Pray that people's eyes will be opened. In the description box below, I do have the Governor Kemp's phone number. That was the number. The 404 number is the one that I used and spoke to somebody yesterday. I tried calling the Speaker of the Senate and House leaders, the GOP Speaker of the House and Senate Majority Leader in Georgia, and the phone rang and rang and rang. And after about 20 times, I gave up on that. I was trying to push the Georgia legislature, because yesterday Michigan was finally acting like they were going to address something. We'll see if something comes of it, but at least the truth is getting out. And when they stand before God, they will not have any excuse because they knew the truth. So, because Luke has 24 chapters, I didn't do anything in Luke yesterday. I thought I'd spend some time in Luke 2 today. I know I'm a day behind on that. But Luke 2 is the Christmas story. And there were things that I thought I would highlight for us today. And I hope you don't mind my doing that. I'm skipping over the birth of Jesus, other than I want to think. I was thinking back to Luke 1, where God, the angel Gabriel, came to Mary. She was scared, and he had to say, "Don't be afraid." It said, "You are highly favored. Don't be afraid, Mary. You have found favor with God. You will be with child and give birth to a son, and you're to give him the name Jesus. He will be great and will be called the Son of the Most High. The Lord will give him the throne of his father David, and he will reign over the house of Jacob forever. His kingdom will never end." Did she realize she was giving birth to the Messiah? I don't know. But, she certainly had some expectations put on her by the angel's message, Was she expecting some kind of promotion for her husband so that they would live in comfort and with privilege? I don't know. That's speculation, but I ponder things. And yes, I know you were watching the hearing in Georgia. I think it was, Diane. You sent me the link. Thank you. Can you imagine having that kind of expectation from the angels, and then they get to Bethlehem when it's time for her? It's her due date, and they're going to Bethlehem for the census. That's why we know when Jesus was born, and we can pinpoint it because there is record of this census. So, but can you imagine Mary coming, riding on a donkey, still in humble circumstances, wondering when this king, this throne, and all this other high and mighty and favor for her, wondering when this is going to happen. She had to have wondered. And then Jesus is born in a stable with shepherds and animals around, and the shepherds, remember, the shepherds back in that day were the lowliest people. They were despised. They were just the riffraff and the little kids that were, put out in the fields with the sheep. And Luke 2:19 said, Mary treasured up all these things and pondered them in her heart. I love that verse. It says that twice in Luke 2. And that really means a lot to me, sharing her name. But I ponder a lot what's going on. And, I ponder what happened to me, coming so close to losing my house, coming here, losing Larry shortly after shortly after he gets home. He didn't live very long. The things that we were doing together, the things that I came with expectations that we would do together. I am working on a book about Larry, but I was expecting him to write another one because he wanted to. He wanted to write about his experience with socialism and communism and overthrowing governments that were overthrowing when they were trying to make a country into another communist country, and he helped to overthrow and stop that. I can't write that for him because I don't know about that. I didn't hear much at all, but all I know is what he has in 28 Years to Nowhere about his work in Nicaragua. I was aware that he helped to overthrow Pol Pot after the Vietnam War ended. And I appreciated that very much because that man was evil the way he killed his people. And my parents took in a refugee couple who had their baby born in Thailand in the refugee camp. That man had carried his pregnant wife on his back for 2 weeks through the forests, through rivers, through the jungles to get to, to cross over to Thailand to try and come to the United States. And most of their family they were able to bring over here, and they're prospering. They left. They joined other family members in other parts of the country, and then ended up in Southern California, where the weather is more like what they're used to, and doing very well. And my parents were invited to their daughter's wedding and so on. So, I have a heart for the people of Cambodia because of what my folks went through in helping this family, and the love that my parents had for them that went both ways. Anyhow, God does things. I got really off track. Sorry about that. But my point is, we read the promises of God. We have expectations. Even if you actually hear from God, like I did, what part of Go to Conway do you not understand, Mary Ellen? I was asked very sternly as I was walking through the kitchen at praying about, what do you expect me to do, Lord? Can I go? And I had another house that I really wanted to buy, and in another area. And God was kind of upset with me that I was thinking a different direction. But, there are times when we have an expectation of what life is going to do for us. And Chris, thanks for being here. And I was on the phone when you called, so I will call you back. But my point here with Luke 2, with Luke 1 and the Gabriel's talking to Mary, the expectations that might have been set up for her. And now in Luke 2, Jesus is born in a stable, for crying out loud. Out there with the animals. I don't know what provisions they would have been able to bring. Donkey, being a beast of burden, can carry quite a bit, but surely she didn't walk the whole way, being pregnant at the end of her term. So, there was a limit to how much they would be bringing with them. So, I'm sure that must have been quite shocking for them to have that expectation. It just gave me a new appreciation for what this whole process was. The shepherds came and saw the baby and went and told everybody in Bethlehem that they met in the evening after the angels had come to them, and what they had seen. And remember, Daniel had set them up. The book of Daniel, the prophet Daniel, had set them up to know when to expect the Messiah, and they were expecting. Now I'm expecting him. Now listen to this. So I'm going down to Luke 2, starting at verse 23. So Mary and Joseph have taken Jesus to the temple. He's going to be circumcised. He's going to be named. They are presenting to him to the Lord. The firstborn child was to be presented to the Lord, but then they would offer a sacrifice to redeem the child. So this is what they've gone to the temple to do, to offer a sacrifice in keeping what is said in the law. They were bringing a pair of doves. Now there was a man in Jerusalem called Simeon. He's an old man who was righteous and devout. He was waiting for the consolation of Israel. In other words, he's waiting for the Messiah because he knows the book of Daniel. And the Holy Spirit was upon him. One of the few people, just like John had the Holy Spirit. We read yesterday about how the Holy Spirit came over Elizabeth, and it had been the angel Gabriel had prophesied to Zechariah that John would have the Holy Spirit from birth. So here we have Simeon, who has the Holy Spirit upon him. It had been revealed to him by the Holy Spirit. Now we're not told how he knew that he would not die before he had seen the Lord's Christ. Now, Christ is another word for anointed one or Messiah. It's a title. Moved by the Spirit, he went into the temple courts. And when the parents, i.e. Mary and Joseph, brought in the child Jesus to do for him what the custom of the law required, Simeon took him in his arms and praised God, saying, "Sovereign Lord, as you have promised, you may now dismiss your servant in peace, for my eyes have seen your salvation." This is interesting. He's saying, I've seen your salvation, God. I've seen Jesus. I have seen the Messiah. Salvation is in a person. which you, God, have prepared in the sight of all the people. So in other words, you have prepared salvation in the sight of all the people. I am here in the sight of all the people looking at this offering of salvation, a light for revelation to the Gentiles. It wasn't just the Jews that were going to be saved. Here he's prophesying that we're going to be, the Gentiles get to be saved as well. And for the glory to your people Israel. And it's interesting that he puts the Gentiles, mentions the Gentiles before the Israelites. So the child's father and mother marveled at what was said about him. So here's a prophet, somebody prophesying over him that he is the Messiah and recognizing him as such. Then Simeon blessed them and said to Mary, his mother, now listen to this part. This is kind of rough because here she is told that he's going to be the Son of the Most High. He's going to sit on David's throne forever. But now Simeon's prophesying, this child is destined to cause the falling and rising of many in Israel and to be a sign spoken against, so that the thoughts of many hearts will be revealed, and a sword will pierce your own soul too. She must have wondered, what's this about a sword? You know, my son's going to be the king and so on, and this is going to be wonderful. All our expectations of the coming Messiah, and you're talking about a sword piercing my heart and sorrow and everything? Are you kidding me? There was also a prophetess named Anna. She was very old. She had lived with her husband for 7 years, and after her marriage, she had lived with her husband for 7 years after they were married. And then she was a widow, and now she's 84. I mean, that's old back in that day. She'd never left the temple, but worshiped night and day with fasting and prayer. Coming up to them at that very moment, she gave thanks to God and spoke about the child to all who were looking forward to the redemption of Jerusalem. To all looking forward to the redemption of Jerusalem. The people were aware that it was time for the Messiah to come. So she's spreading abroad this information. When Joseph and Mary had done everything required by the law, so they're going to leave and go home. But Matthew tells us that the Magi came to visit when they were living in a house, apparently in Bethlehem, because they didn't go home right away. And because the reason I think that is because, you know, they stopped by Herod, and Herod then decides to kill every baby under the age of 2 in Bethlehem, because the Magi did not tell Herod where Jesus was. And remember, before Herod started this assassination of all the little babies, Joseph was told to flee to Egypt to escape Herod's wrath. So when they come back and that's in Matthew 2. So when they come back, now we're in Luke 2:39, when Joseph and Mary had done everything, they returned to Nazareth, and the child grew and became strong. He was filled with wisdom, and the grace of God was upon him. They know that they are raising somebody very significant, and so they are certainly doing a good job of parenting here. You know, when I think of God's ways not being our ways, they've gone up to Nazareth. And when Jesus was calling his disciples, Nathanael said, "Can any good come out of Nazareth?" You know, they didn't think that Bethlehem, they knew, because the prophet said that the Messiah would be born in Bethlehem. But they didn't have any indication that there would be anything to do with Nazareth, except that it says that he will be a Nazarene. But Nazareth was not a real popular place to be. Tradition has it that Joseph was a very excellent carpenter and probably helped, because of the proximity, may have helped build palaces and so on in Caesarea. Anyhow, helped to build roads and so on. So he would have been, and he disappears from the story. And so we don't know how long he lived. Maybe I'm not going to speculate. I was going to speculate, but forget it. You know, when I think about God's ways not being our ways, the people who left Egypt to go to Canaan under Moses' leadership, they didn't go directly. It would have only been a couple weeks' walk, but God took them on a circuitous trip. And then when they finally did get there, they refused to go in because they were scared of the giants. And so then it took another 40 years before they got to the promised land. And what that tells me is we are not to give up. And I think of Larry working on the phone right up to the very end. On Saturday, he was making calls and calls and calls and calls because I know some of the people he called. And he was trying to, he was still working. He was trying to make sure that things were taken care of, that friends were taken care of, that relatives were taken care of. He didn't quit. He didn't give up. And it also made me realize it's never too late for God's will to be accomplished. Because here Larry is 2 days before he died on the program here with us, telling us that God had given him a new mission. And God had called him. He didn't kind of put it in those words, but he knew God had given him a new mission, that it was vitally important. He had talked so many times through the years of 2 Chronicles 7:14, which talks about seeking God's face. And he was so curious about what does that mean to seek God's face? Because he really was concerned about where he stood with the Lord. He was always wondering about that. He finally got to a point where he had forgiven himself for his past, and because he knew God had forgiven him, but he finally was able to forgive himself. And so here he is 2 days before he died saying, I have a new mission. It is vital that people know they need to seek God. You need to know who God is. And saying again, which he'd done before, but saying again so emphatically, if God can save me, Larry, then God can save anyone. It's like the Apostle Paul did. And when I think of how many hours I spent in prayer when I knew God had called me into his life, I knew there was something very special about this man. I couldn't understand why God chose me, other than it was obvious that he couldn't get through to somebody else, and I was willing. It makes me think of Abraham and the call on Abraham's life. How many other people had God called before Abraham said, okay? Larry was a very logical thinker. He was an engineer. He told me one time he had 5 engineering degrees. This guy was brilliant. He kind of saw things black and white. He'd been so betrayed and rejected by Christians that became such a stumbling block to him that he was really concerned about sounding preachy, right? He talked about it all the time. Don't be preachy. He says, I don't want to be preachy, but here's the truth you need to know. It was interesting that at one point he told me that when he played football, he was not allowed to be on the team unless he was baptized. And so he got baptized because that's what you had to do to play football. And that really bothered him. The last couple years of his life really bothered him. He wanted to be baptized appropriately. He said, is that baptism enough for me? He really wanted to be baptized where he could give his testimony of faith. And because of his health, it wasn't possible. And I know that really bothered him. Was there something I was going to read more? Okay. This is where I was going to put it in. Every year, Jesus' parents went to Jerusalem from Nazareth for the feast of Passover. When he was 12, they went to the feast according to the custom. After the feast was over, while his parents were returning home, Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem, but they didn't realize it. Thinking he was in their company, they traveled for a whole day before they started looking for him among their friends and relatives. When they didn't find him, they went back to Jerusalem to look for him. It took them 3 days before they found him in the temple courts among the teachers, listening to them, asking questions, and everyone who heard him was amazed at his understanding and the answers he gave to their questions. When his parents saw him, they were astonished. His mother said to him, "Son, why have you treated us like this? Your father and I have been anxiously searching for you." Can you imagine? Back in that day when life was fairly safe, but there were robbers back in that day. They just didn't know what had happened to this special son they were raising, right? Jesus said to them, "Why were you searching for me? Didn't you know I had to be in my Father's house?" So he's acknowledging God the Father instead of Joseph as his father. But they didn't understand what he was saying to them. Then he went down to Nazareth with them and was obedient to them. But here again we say his mother treasured all these things in her heart. And Jesus grew in wisdom and stature and favor with men. And that reminds me back in chapter 1, where it's talking about John. The child grew and became strong in spirit. So, here we've got John and Jesus growing up with a really strong spirit. And, that just kind of makes me think of Larry and his tenacity with what he did, never giving up and just pushing and pushing. So, one more thing. I saw a video that Alex Jones had band whatever it is, talking yesterday about this second COVID and what a hoax it is. He was claiming what a hoax it is, and the hospitals were not full. And yet Pastor Paul Begley went to the hospital this morning to get some tests done, and he said the place was packed out. So, you got two different conflicting stories coming out about what we're dealing with. And it just made me think of, I'm reading through Ezekiel and I'm reading through Luke as well. So I was in Ezekiel 30 this morning, and I was in the 30s, I should say, 20s and 30s. So Ezekiel 30, verse 9. It talks about being frightened out of complacency and feeling anguish. And Ezekiel 30, verse 13. I need to turn the page, I think. Hang on. I will spread fear throughout the land. And 30, verse 19 says, they will know that I am the Lord. And as they're trying to push fear on us, and we seem to hear stories in the news about the COVID, and then we hear stories about the election fraud, and they're going back and forth trying to keep us off balance. Mitch McConnell, I think, was talking again today, and anyhow, Congress was back in session, and I don't know if they're working on another stimulus package, and what all are they trying to throw in there extra. Trump's already warned that he will have to veto something if they try to slip in too much garbage. So not only be praying for the witnesses for their safety, pray for President Trump. Larry told us in 2016 there would be a coup, that the coup had already started right from the beginning of Trump's announcement, and the whole time they were out to get him and put him aside. Larry knew that Hillary had been destined to bring in communism. He knew that. And so he knew if Trump didn't win, if Trump did win, that bought us time against communism. And he was working so hard, which is my Never Socialism bumper sticker isn't beside me anymore. I sent it out. I do have some more, though, if you want one. He worked as hard as he could to stop this coup and let us know that's what the media is doing. So we need to be praying that people's eyes will be opened so that God doesn't have to do these awful things to make us know that he is God, Greg, you're right. December 21st is called the Grand Conjunction. Jupiter and Saturn will be closer in alignment than they have been since Christ's birth. So look at the big star in the sky on the 21st. Yes, big. Biden certainly wants to take us into Nazism and communism and so on. And we had to make sure Trump won. And we know that Trump won this election, but it was taken away from him after hours. And the stories that you hear, I mean, Diamond and Silk put it up. The White House puts up, you can go to the White House on YouTube. Let's see, I'm trying to think of some other people I've seen. And yeah, you can hear for yourself in these hearings the things that have gone on, the closing everything down, sending everybody home, except a few Democrats who are there packing the machine with ballots. So I look at Trump with caution. He's not the Antichrist. He's not the Christ. He's not the Messiah. We have to be cautious. I'm cautiously optimistic that what he wants for the country is a good thing. There are things I hear about him that make me very concerned, and Larry was concerned too. So we don't just blindly rah, rah, rah. I get very aware and very cautious about groupthink. I know what it's like to be at a Trump rally. I know the electricity in the air. I felt it. The electricity in the air with everybody so incredibly crazed with enthusiasm. Yes, Right Side Broadcasting is doing the Georgia hearing right now. Well, Trump's more than just the lesser of two evils. Remember, Deuteronomy 30 verse 19 says, I set before you life and death, blessing and cursing, therefore choose life. And we know Biden is pro-death and Trump is pro-life. And therefore we had a clear choice again, last time and this time with Trump. And now what happens afterwards, we don't know. But if we want God's blessing, we have to keep this man in office. So, keep praying about this, folks. There is, who was I listening to? I was listening to somebody this morning, and they were in it might have been Dutch Sheets. It might have been Dana Coverstone. They were sitting in a place. They were on a cruise. Somebody was talking about being on a cruise. So they were on a cruise, and I know it was the leader of my prayer and fasting group on Facebook, was on a cruise with her church. Come to find out, there was a witchcraft conference on that cruise line at the same time. They were in the dining room with the high priestess of this witch's coven, and they were praying and talking together. And the high priestess got up with the other women and very loudly said, there is something changed in the atmosphere here. We have to go. And so, she was reminding us that we have got to be aware of the spiritual forces at work right now, behind the scenes, but getting more and more blatant. I saw that picture there. If you go to DutchSheets.org, you can see the video from 3:00 Eastern time, Wednesday morning, where the bell on the tower over Independence Hall rang 3, and this streak of light came down and hovered right above that building. And I saw it just as a streak of light from somebody's phone. Somebody else got a different picture, and you can see the shape of an angel on her phone. It was stunning. The Lord wants Trump in. Sadhu Sundar Selvaraj has spoken about that very many times this year and said, we really are at a point where God is waiting to see what America will do. Will we allow Biden to win, or will we work to keep Trump in? So there are two things. I put the governor of Georgia's phone number down below. Use the 404 number. The other thing, the other thing I've suggested you do, let's today write the president and offer him encouragement. Let him know you're praying for him. Let him know that we will not stand for the overturning of this election, and we want him to take it as far as necessary. Okay, as far as necessary to make sure that he wins. Don't give up. So that's it for today. I'll be back tomorrow. I do have a guest coming on. We were supposed to do it Wednesday of last week, and I was having computer trouble and couldn't figure out how to make it happen. And so I have figured that out today, and all is well. And so I need to get in touch with, his name is Troy Anderson, and he agreed to come on. He's writing a new book on I think his first book was on Armageddon. I'm not real sure what his second one is. He had said that if you contacted him, he'd send I don't know if he just wanted to get some people to read it, but I haven't received it from him yet. So I need to get in touch with him now that I know today, but I just, got the computer going a little bit ago before the show. So I don't know if he'll come on tomorrow or if we'll have him next week. But now that I have the computer working again, I love my lack of technical skills. Anyhow, we're hearing about the many flights to Guantanamo and so on. That supposedly Haspel, the head of the CIA, was in Frankfurt, and yet they claim she was in DC. They claim she was shot, injured. It's hard to know what these stories are. I know a lot of times I've asked Larry about some of these stories, and he says no. But on the other hand, when it comes to intelligence, each person has their own little bit of stuff and not a whole lot of overlap. So, who knows? Don't be afraid. Be strong and courageous. Please write to the president tonight. And let's keep these electors, let's keep these legislators' feet to the fire. Contact them as many as you can to say, let's do the right thing. And of course, the governor is not the one who certifies the election. It's the legislators themselves. So they're playing quite a psyop on us. Don't fall for it. Be strong and courageous. Keep your eyes on the Lord. All right. Talk to you tomorrow. Bye now.